Thank you very much, Sarabi and Babu, and I would like to thank Canadian Human Rights Voice for giving me this opportunity, and I work for Canadian Human Rights Voice, who is creating peace, justice, and equality around the globe. Gender impacts of Talibanization in Pakistan. I would like to start my talk today at the auspicious forums of Ontario Legislature by acknowledging a female who survived an attack from the brutal, violent forces in Swat, Pakistan, and is planning to reply back by the power of pen, books, and knowledge. Yes, Malala Yousafzai, a young 16-year-old girl who has become an unprecedented example and an ambassador for all women and girls under the siege of anarchist, non-state, militaristic agents like Taliban's, by showing the courage to take up books instead of guns. Norwegian Nobel Peace Prize Committee Thorbjørn Jagland, while paying a special tribute to Malala, said, and I quote, "Your courage is sending a strong message to women to stand up for their rights, and which constitutes a precondition for peace. And here I stand as a rippled effect of that belief." Malala Yousafzai believes and realizes the importance of light when there is darkness, the importance of voice when there is silence, the importance of books, pens, and knowledge in face of guns. The bullet to her head did not silence her, but gave birth to thousands of voices, and I am one voice. My lecture is an endeavor to create an understanding of the gendered role, perceptions, and the impact of Talibanization. An intersectional approach to gender is adopted to have a nuanced understanding as gender intersects with class, ethnicity, religion, sect, and other social divisions which shape experiences. My lecture is going to focus on the role of women in the radicalization, both as victims and as agents for promoting radicalization. So let me take my audience to the Talibanized Pakistan of 2009 and 2010, where Taliban struck Swat, Pakistan with disconcerting regularity and, among atrocities, imposed a ban on the education of girls. So when they struck Pakistan, the women were the first casualty of Talibanization in Pakistan. Even before this ban, there was 100 school girls in Swat, as well as more than 150 such schools in the greater federal administrative areas were shut down, many after being bombed or torched, leaving approximately 100,000 girls out of school. Radio announcements warned girls that they could be attacked with acid if they dared to attend schools, and teachers were threatened and killed. The attacks and threats were not confined to schoolgirls. Women and girls were ordered to wear full veils. Directives were issued requiring that women be accompanied by male family members in public places, and forbidding women from carrying compulsory government identification cards displaying their photographs. About a dozen women have been shot for immoral activities, including very important person Bak Zeba, a 45-year-old social worker committed to advancing girls' education. The area seems to be in competition with Afghanistan, which is the worst in women's rights. The Pakistani and Afghani governments have responded similarly to the Taliban's penchant for terrorizing the population. A few months ago, Afghanistan sought to enter into negotiations with the Taliban, a precondition of which would be the imposition of Islamic law or Sharia. While those talks have not yet gone forward, Pakistan seems to be on the brink of accepting enforcement of Sharia in the FATA territories. Reports indicate that more than 70 Taliban courts already operate in Swat Valley, a first step towards implementation Taliban's interpretation of Sharia. Pakistan must not become Afghanistan. Now let me just see. Let's see who are Talibans. Talibans emerged in the early 1990s from the leftovers of Mujahideens who were fighting a war against Soviets in Afghanistan. I don't want to go into the history of who made Talibans, and I just want to keep the political aspects of it, focus more on the gender impacts. So it is commonly believed that they first appeared in religious seminaries which preached a hardline form of Sunni Islam. And the Taliban's promise was that they will create and restore peace and security and enforce their kind of austere version of Sharia or Islamic law once they are in power. Yes, please. And what is Talibanization? Talibanization, whatever Talibans do is Talibanization, which was a term coined following the rise of Taliban movement in Afghanistan, referring to the process where other religious groups or movements come to follow or imitate the strict practices of Taliban. What are the strict practices of Taliban? Flogging, beheading, mass execution, banning a long list of activities for women and girls, for example, stopping them from going to schools, stopping them to go to work, harboring Al-Qaeda or other Islamic terrorists, hatred towards the West, and hatred towards Western style of democracy, and hatred towards gender equality. So these are all the actions which Taliban have been doing, and they have been trying to impose it in Afghanistan and the northern areas of Pakistan. So what really happened was that after the in the aftermath of 9/11, a war on terrorism was imposed on Afghanistan to kick out the Taliban hideouts, Al-Qaeda hideouts, and NATO and US forces were together, and Pakistan also promised to be siding with them. So as a result, when Talibans were kicked out from Afghanistan, they were defeated for some time, they found hideouts in the Pakistan northern areas. They infiltrated through the porous borders of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and once they regathered themselves, when they recouped, they got weapons and they pledged to take revenge on Pakistan. And that revenge was the imposition of Talibanization and their hardcore orthodox Islamic version, and the first casualty of Talibanization and that revenge of Talibans was women. So any conflicts, whether natural or man-made, have multiple and differential impacts on men and women, as their experience of conflict is mediated through their genders. Women are socially positioned as subordinate to men in these particular areas. They do not have equal access to opportunities, resources, and power. Due to their lower social economic position, they are more vulnerable, have the least capacity to cope with the impacts of conflicts, humans, and natural disasters. That is why they face trafficking and kidnapping, forced marriages, and sexual harassment. Several researchers have conducted in the areas of peace and conflict and wars across the world show that not only the impact, but the perception and perspectives of women and men of conflicts are fairly gendered. In general, women are perceived as passive victims of war conflicts who do not play any active role in initiating or participating in wars and conflict. However, there are plenty of examples that show that women are not only the victim of wars and conflicts, but they also play an active role as combatants and supporters of wars and political violence. So this part of my lecture is slightly touching on how women in Pakistan in the northern areas have become a strong active agent to side with Taliban. One important case in point is the Lal Masjid incident, where women played an active role as front-line soldiers to promote a radical religious agenda. Women were being actively recruited converted to madrasas by various religious, political outfits. It is important to understand the social and political conditions in which women move towards joining radical Islamist groups. And what are those conditions? It's fear, propaganda, and patriarchy, male dominance, which has pushed women in the northern areas to join Talibanization forces. So these women, what they did at that time, around 2009-2010, they played an active role in lending moral and financial support to Tehreek-e-Nafaz-e-Sharia, which is one of the branches of Taliban, and they were influenced by one of the very strong proponents of Taliban called Maulana Fazlullah, and he used to have his own FM radio. He got so famous because of his propaganda and because of his fear-mongering speeches that he became, that his radio started, he was called Radio Fazlullah actually. And he was very effective and popular, and his radio show was called Mullah Radio, I remember. So according to the research, and Mullah, one of the radios which Malala has of course mentioned in one of her speeches, that Mullah Radio really changed the ideologies and thinking pattern among women, and they were scared and they were so scared that they started really aligning with the Talibanization forces. So according to the research which I've been doing, women used to listen to Mullah Radio religious sermons and supported his political agenda of the enforcement of Sharia in Malakand, again, north of Pakistan. They were made to believe that he will be able to deliver on the demands for a quick justice. Some people got so influenced by him that they generally contributed to Fazlullah's madrasas in Sabah. They voluntarily stopped listening to music, threw their CDs and recorders, because according to the strict Talibanization laws, no one can listen to music, watch movies, wear nice jewelry, and women are supposed to be shut in burqas, like from top to head. Burqa is a piece of clothing which covers a woman from the head to the bottom. So the entire process of propagandization was very successful by this Maulana Fazlullah. And it was so successful that women were voluntarily donating their jewelry so that the cause of Talibanization would be successful. So I just want to focus on how women were emotionally strung to the ideology of Maulana Fazlullah here, and how Talibanization impact on the psyche of women. So I just talked about how women have become an agents in the process of Talibanization. I will now focus on how they have become victims, and they're still being victims. Right now, when I stand, there is a woman up there in Pakistan, in the northern areas, who is facing adverse effects of Talibanization. So I'll just focus on the Nizam-e-Adl regulations imposed in February 2009 by Taliban, and I will talk on the social impacts, which is composed of the health impact, mobility aspects, and particularly health and economic and political gendered impacts of Talibanization because of the Nizam-e-Adl regulation in 2009. Very important is the how was health of women impacted. So there was in that time period when Nizam-e-Adl was regulated in northern areas, there was a lack of access to healthcare facilities that impacted women under the Talibanization of Sabah. The delivery of social services got badly disrupted due to the ongoing conflict between Taliban's local administration and the security forces. There was not only a shortage of drugs and non-availability of necessary medical equipment and lack of medical staff in the conflict area, there were additional restrictions imposed by Taliban on result, male doctors. Female patients are not allowed, according to Taliban ideology, to go to a male doctor. What's the result? There are severe rippling effects on the health of women in Talibanized area. This created a disastrous health situation in the conflict area. Women had to suffer health risks due to non-availability of lady doctors in the medical facilities and hospitals and small clinics. The absence of men in women's lives poses greater health risks as they were unable to access health services on their own because they are not allowed, women are not allowed to go outside their houses without a male relative, also called a mahram. So they face tremendous health issues because of their restricted mobility. And also children, they faced higher risks due to terrorism as Taliban put a ban on polio vaccination. Taliban believe that polio vaccination comes from West. It's an import from West, and anything from West is considered to be a sin, it's considered to be haram, and who are the casualties? The kids and women. So again, women face so many of these problems, health problems. Connected with this is impact on education, and I explained previously that schools were shut, other education institutions were shut. So I'm just not going to go elaborate. I'm not going to elaborate on that because we just covered that. I will just come on a very interesting result of Talibanization, which is the gendered impact of terrorism on the mobility of the female agency. Taliban's imposed severe restrictions on women's mobility. They were not allowed to leave their houses unaccompanied by a mahram or a male relative, as I just said. In the absence of men, women did not dare to step out of their homes due to the fear of persecution by Taliban. Taliban stopped women from going out to work in offices, government departments, or in the fields. They were not allowed to shop in bazaars or enter restaurants. They were not permitted to attend funerals. The restriction on the freedom of movement had a subsequent impact on the traditional spaces that are given to women. Next, please. So these restrictions there was a lot of impact on the freedom of women, and which had a subsequent impact on the traditional spaces that were given to women in local cultural public arena. These traditional spaces are rivers, where women used to go out and wash their clothes, fetch water. These traditional spaces also the forest, where women go out and gather wood to make fire. So there was, in other words, Taliban created a limitation on all these women to gather at these spots, socially interact, and solve their issues. It was kind of a ban for women to go out and meet their social support networks, and because why? The mobilization of women was restricted. Now what happened as a result? There was an increased workload on the menfolk because women are not allowed to go out, fetch water, wash clothes, get wood from the forest. Who else is going out? Men are going out and they're going to increase their workload. So that created a lot of risks again. All unpaid work that women used to do outside their homes, such as work in agricultural fields, fetching water, for fuel, washing clothes or rivets, and taking care of animals grazing, was shifted to men now. So there is a shift of roles. Men are doing two kinds of work. They have more burden now. Men lost control over women's free domestic labor in this very scenario. They found it difficult to manage and run their households without the help and free labor of the womenfolk. This created a tension between private and public patriarchy. While men like to dominate and control their wives and womenfolk, they were not willing to let go of their own power and control in favor of collective patriarchy of Taliban's. All the private and public patriarchy was interwoven as both rest on power imbalances between men and women. However, these were competing for control over women's bodies and lives. So women had to face this power imbalance on because of both the patriarchies they were facing, their men as well as the Taliban. There is an entire research for next please. There is an entire research on research and facts, hard facts, that women face a lot of gender-based violence, and they were flogged. If they were caught talking to a man who was not a mahram, they were flogged. They were even raped, and they were any girl found who was 12 years or younger, if she's found she was unmarried, she would just be married to any of the Talibans under 12 years of age. There are very many cases where Taliban would just enter the houses and stay in the houses till they wanted to. And women, there are reports that women who would not agree to what Talibans are saying, women who would not agree to the moral standards of Talibans, would be raped and sexually harassed. So that is a really important point again. Another important point I would like to raise is the forced internal displacement of women. Because there were 3 million civilians who were displaced after the operation in 2009 and 2010 in Savannah. The experience of displacement was highly gendered. It's disproportionately disadvantaged women because they were confined to the camps due to the strict restriction of parda. What is parda? P-U-R-D-A-H. Again, parda is a moral standard given by Taliban where women have to cover from their head to toe, and they're confined. They're not allowed to go out anywhere, not allowed to meet any other man other than their male relative. And those women who had no men relatives, they were living in camps, and they were sending their children to queue up in lines to receive food. That was really, really sad. They were so restricted in their mobility. They exposed to greater hardship and health risk in the internal displacement process they faced. And because women have their reproductive roles, and because of this displacement, they even faced further problems and further limitations to live healthy lives. In these camps, when these women in Sabat, they were living after Talibanization, they lacked reproductive healthcare facilities, and a lot of problems were for pregnant and lactating mothers who suffered malnutrition because of a lot of amenities which should be available to such mothers. Now, connected to health problems, there were psycho and social problems as well faced by women. Severe physical and psychological problems. Women suffered from physical and psychological abuse together, and they were traumatized. They were really traumatized due to Talibanization and the subsequent military operation. They were living in constant threat of death and experienced feelings of hopelessness, constant bombing, artillery, and there's a constant fear of death lingering on the minds of these women, of course with their men, but men being sensitive, they had to face a constant threat that any day, anytime they'll go out, or anytime if they even don't go out, they will be bombed and they will die. So they faced a lot of depression, insomnia, and disillusionment. Connected to this is the economic impact, and I'm getting close to the conclusion. Of course, when a country is a war-ravaged country, it faces huge economic impacts. Sabat is a beautiful place. It's called the paradise of, I would like to call it paradise of the world. Their people call it paradise of Pakistan. They lose a lot of tourism. There was agricultural land was ravaged by Taliban. The cattle was destroyed. Livelihood was lost among the menfolk, and women were not allowed to work. So they faced huge economic impacts, particularly the women. Because women in these South Asian culture, women in a household are the ones who will eat after their menstrual, who will eat later. What is left over, they will eat that. So after there is war and there is less food and there is less employment, where would women stand? You want to think it on yourselves. I would like to conclude here, please. And for my conclusion, I would like to ask questions to my audience. But before that, I would like to talk about what is the duty of people living here who are connected to South Asia and connected to back home in Pakistan. How can we change the lives of the people, of our homes, of our original homes? And last but not least, I'd like to end my talk by Malala's own words that weakness, fear, and hopelessness has died. Strength, power, and courage has risen. Thank you.